Welcome back, friends. In this video we are going to do the MODFLOW interpolating layer data tutorial. And in the previous tutorial we learned how to use the geostatistics tools in GMS to do just general purpose interpolation. We used a case where we are interpolating concentrations from a contaminant plume. And one of the more common ways that interpolation is used is to interpolate the top and bottom elevations of the layers in your MODFLOW grid. And GMS has some really nice tools to streamline, automate that process, and so we'll be talking about those tools today. So this is the tutorial we'll be doing, and if you go to the Aquavea website where the tutorials are located, it's in the main MODFLOW tab under the interpolating layer data section right here. And there's a PDF file you download, and there's also a zip archive that you download, unzip, and when you do so it looks like this. It says layer data. It's layerdata.zip, and then I've unzipped it to be in this folder layer data. And there is a project file called points.gpr, which we're going to open up and start going through. So let me move some of this off the screen here. Whoops, let's see. This is the one. Let me bring GMS up right here. There we go. So I'm going to use the file open and open up this points.gpr file, and I'm going to expand the project window here, and let's see what we have. What we have here is we have a 3D grid, and we're in ortho mode, so we're looking down on the top layer. This is the front view, side view, and if we switch out of ortho mode and go into oblique mode, then we can rotate that around. We have just a very simple 3-layer MODFLOW grid. We've changed the colors of these layers to kind of highlight the different layers, and then we have 4 different scatter point sets, and I'm just going to kind of toggle them off one at a time. So if we look in plan view, they're all at the same location, but each scatter point set has 4 data sets: top 1, bottom 2, bottom 3. So the top 1 data set we will use to interpolate to the top elevations of layer 1. BOT1 will interpolate to the bottom of layer 1, BOT2 to the bottom of layer 3, and BOT3 to the bottom of layer 3. So we have multiple data sets, and we imported these points the same way that we imported the plume data scatter points. And so what we're going to do is we're going to interpolate these data sets or scatter point sets and their associated data sets to the MODFLOW grid. Now, one way to do that is you could do it one scatter point set at a time, so you could, or one data set at a time. So we could select case number 1 and top 1, and then go through an interpolation process to interpolate that to the top elevation array of layer number 1. And then we could repeat that for the bottom of 1. But since we're using kind of the same locations, and you probably use the same interpolation scheme every time, there's a methodology, or there's an option built into GMS to let you do that all at once, and that is this interpolate to MODFLOW layers command. Now, before we do that, we have to initialize our MODFLOW data. We have a 3D grid but no MODFLOW data. Now, another thing, there's no MODFLOW menu up here in the 3D grid module. Whenever you see that, sometimes the interface gets turned off before it gets saved. So if you go down in the edit menu, go down to model interfaces and just turn the MODFLOW interface on, then you'll see it show up here, and we can select new simulation, we don't care about any of the packages at this point. We just need to have that initiated so that we can interpolate to the top and bottom elevation array. So that this basically creates the MODFLOW top and bottom elevation arrays. And so now I'm going to go back, select case number 1, and we're going to select interpolate to MODFLOW layers. Now the way this works is on the left hand side it lists all of your available scatter point sets, and here it lists all of the available MODFLOW arrays to which you can interpolate. And then you can select one here, and do map, and it creates a relationship. It says, okay, interpolate this data set to this MODFLOW array. And that creates a mapping, and the defined mappings are shown in the bottom. Now it turns out that GMS looks at the names of your data sets and it tries to guess how you want to create the mappings. And so based on the way these are spelled, it sees TOP in the name and it sees the number 1, so it says, oh, you probably want to map this to top elevations layer 1. Now we can unmap all of these and then go in and recreate them. So this would be top layer 1, bottom layer 1, bottom layer 2, and bottom layer 3, and there you have all the relationships. And you can also adjust your interpolation options if you want. We're going to keep the defaults, and when we click OK, what it does is it, if you go in here in the array, it interpolates all of these arrays in one shot. So all 4 of those interpolations were done at once. And if we go into side view, you can see what that's done. We now have, instead of a flat top and bottom, we now have this nicely curved top and bottom. And if I go into oblique view and rotate that around, you can see how nicely that's interpolated our top and bottom elevations. And so, yeah, it's gosh, very easy to do, and allows you to do that in one step, and sometimes that's all you need to do. Now in other cases, so that's the more general case. It's just everything interpolates, there are no overlaps, everything is, every layer is well defined. But what if you have a case like this where you have like an embedded seam in the middle of your layer? So that's what we're going to do with case number 2. So we're going to highlight case number 2, and we'll go back into ortho mode, look on the side, and so we're going to do case number 2 and select interpolate to MODFLOW layers, and we'll just accept the default mappings in this case and click OK. And now what's happened, you'll see the bottom elevation of layer 1 goes below the bottom elevation of layer 2. The bottom elevation of layer 2 goes above its top elevation. And so you have basically a pinch out right here. And right in this region, you have an overlap. And that will definitely give you errors when you go to run MODFLOW. And so we have to fix that. So the way you fix that is you go to the MODFLOW menu and select check simulation, and you do run check, and it says error, bottom elevation is higher than top elevation, and so forth, and it highlights all these errors. And over on the right side in the model checker, there's a fix layer errors button, and if you click on that, it has a set of tools you can use to fix these layer errors. It says, okay, you have 763 cells in layer 2 that have an overlap error. And there are different ways you can fix that. We're going to use the average method. So wherever you have an overlap, in the area of overlap, it calculates the average elevation, and then it moves the top one just a little bit above that and the bottom one a little bit below. So it creates a little pinch out. You can, and it does it down to this minimum thickness. And if you want to, you can inactivate the cells in that thin zone. We're going to leave them on because we typically, when you're using the normal version of MODFLOW, you don't want to have cells in the middle with the go inactive. There needs to be a connection there. And so we're going to select Fix Selected Layer here. And then we'll click Done, and now you can see we've got that pinch out done. And in this zone right here, layer 2 is still there, it's just really thin, and so you'd want to select those cells and maybe give them a hydraulic conductivity equal to the upper material or something like that. I don't know, there are different ways you could do that. And you probably wouldn't want it to go that thin. You could if you, now point, a tenth of a unit is really small, but you can play with that minimum thickness number and change that. Let's look at this in oblique view. Rotate that around. You can get a feel for what that looks like. Okay. All right. So that's case number 2. What have we got with case number 3? With case number 3, we are going to simulate. Whoops! I expanded a little too high. We're going to simulate this kind of outcropping here. So we have the top layer only goes part way. Now, in this case, it's perfectly okay for layer 1 to go over to this point and then disappear. Then layer 2 becomes the top most active layer. Having a missing layer between 2 layers is a problem, but there's no problem having it on the top or bottom like this, and when you're using the normal version of MODFLOW, the original version. So let's go to case number 3. And we'll say interpolate to MODFLOW layers, click OK, and now you'll see we have a different kind of overlap occurring. The top of layer 2 goes above the top of layer 1. And so once again, let's go into our MODFLOW check simulation dialog. We do run check, and it shows we have errors, and then we'll do fix layer errors. It says we've got all these on layer 1, and the way we want to fix that is using this thing that says preserve top. It says if you have something, a bottom elevation that pokes up above the top on a layer, it clips, it keeps the top elevation where it is, but then it clips the bottom elevation. And also we're going to turn on this inactivate thin cells, because once we've done that clipping, we're going to take those thin cells in that area and we're going to just turn them off. So we'll do fix selected layer. Okay, done. And so this should be yellow over here. I noticed the version of GMS I'm using right now has a little bit of a bug with the display refreshing. So if I just click on the bottom and then the top grid here, it cycles it and it fixes that display. So this is what we would expect to see. So this top layer has kind of been truncated once it gets really thin, and this bottom elevation, or excuse me, the top of the second layer is clipped to what we had extended over here as the top of the first layer. And again, we can go into oblique view, rotate that around, give you a good sense of what that looks like. And then for the final example, we're going to look at something called bedrock truncation, where we have, and this is kind of common, you have maybe your bedrock is in the shape of a valley, and you have these sedimentary layers that fill this in, alluvial or something, and you just you want to interpolate these layers, but then clip them to this lower surface. And our last case has been set up to simulate this. But before we do that, we need to activate all of our cells. So I'm going to go into the I-bound array. You can see we have a bunch of zeros here. I'm going to select constant to grid and click OK. And now those are all active. I'm going to select case number 4. Interpolate to MODFLOW layers. And now we have some crazy stuff going on with our bottom. The bottom of layer 3 now extends up all the way above the top of layer 1. And so what we want to do is we want to take the bottom, that bottom of layer 3, and use that to clip all these other layers so that anything sticking out beyond that is inactivated, and then the bottom elevation is adjusted to this to this bottom elevation we have here, and that is the next option here, and this thing called truncate to bedrock. And so basically, as this little diagram shows, anything that extends beyond this bottom elevation just gets clipped. So we'll select that and do fix affected layers. And then again, we have to like cycle our, click one of these here to fix the display. It gets out of sync. And now as we rotate that around, you'll see that we have, there's our clipped bedrock, and our layers rather clipped to the bedrock. And once they go outside of that surface at the bottom, they get turned off. And another way to look at this, we can go into plan view and select a cell, and then look at, whoops, I need to go into ortho mode, and we just look at that in, here we go, in front view. So now we're looking at different columns, and I can use this little spin control here to kind of cycle along those. We're just looking at one column of cells at a time as we cycle through this. Actually, if I hold the button down, it kind of animates that, which is kind of fun. And there we go. Let's go from, let's see if we can animate the other way. Yeah, there we go. Now we're going from left to right through the rows. And again, back to ortho mode, excuse me, oblique mode. And there are our results. So, in summary, if you have multiple data sets that you want to interpolate to your MODFLOW layers, you can do that in one step using the interpolate to MODFLOW layers command. And then if that interpolation creates some overlap errors, using the MODFLOW check simulation dialog and then clicking on the fix layer errors button, you have a number of options at your disposal for correcting, adjusting those overlap errors. And that's it.